Hi, I'm Hannah and this is Phil. You're joining us today for a seminar on community, but a bit of a disclaimer, we certainly aren't experts on this topic. We have a few personal experiences of community and I've also talked with quite a lot of people over the years about what it means to pursue community in different formats. We are still very much on a journey with this ourselves, but we hope we can share with you some of the things that we've been learning.
So what we're going to cover today? Well, we're going to look at what community is, in particular Christian community, and we're going to look at some barriers to becoming part of a community, or barriers to community that you come across, and spend some time discussing the practicalities of how we go about living in community, as well as some things to keep in mind and to take away. We've only got half an hour today. If you want to know more, there's a great teaching series from Bridgetown Church in Portland that we've watched quite a bit of, and there's plenty of other resources available as well. We know that everyone brings their own good and bad experiences of community to the table. With this online format, it's not going to be easy to give opportunity to share and discuss in the same way that we would have liked, but we hope you can take away a few key thoughts, ideas or questions that you want to ponder with your community, or that you want to consider as you seek to form or join a community.
So, is there a need for community today? Well, COVID-19 and being in lockdown has been a challenging time for all of us. But one of the positive things that a number of people have mentioned is a greater sense of community, as neighbours have got to know each other better, set up WhatsApp groups and ways of keeping in touch. In our town, an amazing town-wide response group was set up, was formed from volunteers covering requests for help in every street across the town. So that's amazing that these things are happening, but loneliness is still a big issue for a lot of people. In October 2018, Radio 4 did a survey on loneliness online, and they had about over 55,000 people responded to this survey. Interestingly, the results of the survey indicate that 16 to 24-year-olds experience loneliness more often and more intensely than any other age group. 40% of respondents in that age group reported feeling lonely often or more often, compared with 27% of people aged over 75. They also said that found that people who feel lonely more often have more online-only Facebook friends. Also, only a third of respondents felt that loneliness was to do with being on your own, and was actually more to do with feeling disconnected from the world and not feeling that you have anyone who understands you. So in a society where individualism is really highly valued, we have a problem. Many people feel lonely, isolated, disconnected and misunderstood. It seems that there is a deep need for something that can fulfill those needs. We believe a relationship with God goes a long way towards that, but we also need the support, encouragement and accountability of others to keep us on track, and that's where community comes in.
So what is community? What does it look like, and how does it express itself? The word community has a range of meanings. It can refer to people who live in the same area, people with common interests or occupations, a sense of fellowship, or even common ownership. But let's have a look at a few of the examples in the Bible. So Genesis 1:26 says, God said, "Let us make mankind in our image, after our likeness." You'll notice that plural there, that us, the our. So if we're made in his image, that means that we're also made for community, because God is community. Next, here's Jesus speaking from Matthew 4. Jesus was walking by the Sea of Galilee when he saw Simon, Peter and Andrew, and he said, "Come, follow me, and I will send you out to fish for people." Come, follow me is an invitation to community. For the duration of Jesus' ministry, he lived in this community. They travelled together, ate together, chatted together, argued together and laughed together. And then we have the church in Acts. Acts 2:42-45 says, "They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship, to the breaking of bread and to prayer. Everyone was filled with awe at the many wonders and signs performed by the apostles. All the believers were together and had everything in common. They sold property and possessions to give to anyone who had need. Now, the themes that you hear there have been repeated in various different forms throughout the history of the church and church community. From monastic communities to many denominations, house churches, and other new expressions of church community, such as houses of prayer, boiler rooms, missional communities, and new monastic communities. So community can have many different expressions and meanings, but essentially, when we're talking about Christian community today, we're referring to it in the sense of a group of people who follow Jesus together.
Okay, but how is Christian community different? Because it's obviously possible to find a level of community outside the church. For example, being part of a football club, a choir, an environmental protest movement. If I wanted to lose weight, I might join a slimming group where I'd receive support, encouragement and accountability to help me reach my goal, which are some of the things that we mentioned about community earlier on. But how is Christian community distinctive? Well, let's turn to Colossians chapter 3. I'm going to look at a few verses there which might help us find some things. Chapter 3, verse 11 of Colossians. Here there is no Gentile or Jew, circumcised or uncircumcised, barbarian, Scythian, slave or free, but Christ is all and is in all. This verse is saying that while there are differences, there aren't distinctions when we are all in Christ. So the first point is that the Christian community is different and distinctive in that it's united by faith in Jesus and not just a common interest. Jesus Christ leveled the playing field in that he sacrificed his life for us all in order to offer each of us a chance to turn toward him and receive forgiveness and eternal life. So we aren't joining a social club of people with similar interests, but a diverse family from different backgrounds, ages, ethnicities, race, political parties, etc. This is one of the most beautiful things about the church and the kingdom of God. We went to a 24/7 prayer gathering in Frankfurt quite a few years ago, and one of my most distinctive memories from it is being in a session where there was worship, and we were quite near the back, and in front of us there was this really tall guy, maybe sort of 6'4", 6'5", a big guy with a Mohican, with earrings, with chains, with tattoos, and right next to him was this diminutive little Catholic nun in her habit, and they were both worshipping their heart out to Jesus. And to me, it always just sticks in my mind as a beautiful picture of the unity of the church and the Christian community, that we are united by our faith in Jesus. And not by common interests. And that kind of unity breaks down barriers. It's not denying the differences and diversity, but declaring that there is something much more powerful that unites us. Christ is all and is in all. In addition, I think Christian community is distinctive in that we should be seeking to grow in love towards God and others. In fact, I think the times when the church and Christian community has caused the most pain and damage is when we haven't done this and modelled the values in the next part of this passage. So Colossians chapter 3 verse 12. Therefore, as God's chosen people, holy and dearly loved, clothe yourselves with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness and patience. From a place of being loved by God, we are called to love others. I don't think any of us read that and think that we've got that sorted. I certainly have room to grow. Verse 13. Bear with each other and forgive one another. If any of you has a grievance against someone, forgive as the Lord forgave you. Relationships can be challenging. We say and do wrong things. We hurt each other. But are we prepared to grow in love by apologising when we get it wrong and by choosing to forgive others who have wronged us? Verse 14. Over all these virtues, put on love, which binds them all together in perfect unity. I need to choose to put on love every day like the clothes I wear. We don't grow in love by constantly being around lovely people who think exactly the same as us, as nice as we might think that might be. We grow in love when we come across difference of opinion and personality, when something in our life or our worldview is challenged and we have a choice of how to respond. On my gap year, I lived in a house with a number of other people, and we were sort of, I guess, living as a form of community. And I remember there was a time when one of the other people in the community, we were great friends, but we were very different. And I remember something about them was I just found it a bit irritating, and I was saying to God, please help me love this person more, because I find this really irritating about them. And then we were having a time when we were praying for one another, and this person came out and just said, oh, will you please pray for me, because God's really highlighting this thing in my life that I need to change and I need to work on. And it was the thing that was annoying me. And instantly I just felt this rush of love for them, because I thought, actually, God is already working in their life, and that's where community for me was really helpful in terms of growing, I guess, how I saw other people, and seeking to, that whole thing of seeking to grow in love towards God and other people was really helpful. There are lots of other things that could be said of Christian community. We don't really have a lot of time to cover that today, but I guess one last thing that's important to say is that it isn't a closed club. And ultimately, we want others to feel welcome to join us and for them to experience the love of community while they explore faith in Jesus.
So what are the barriers to community? Let's start with individualism. Present-day Western culture places a massive emphasis on independence and the bettering of self, whether that's in a work context, lifestyle, or many other areas. However, this focus on self can result in a shift of focus away from God and away from those around us, which can lead to loneliness and isolation. I'm not saying we shouldn't focus on ourselves at all, and I don't want to diminish the importance of self-awareness. Actually, I found it's very beneficial in helping me to be more aware of how my character impacts relationship with God and with others. Accepting our need for reliance and relationship with God and others is admitting weakness, which is not easy or straightforward. But the result is that instead of the loneliness of individualism, we have relationships that lead to a sense of belonging. The next barrier is expectation. So, what are your expectations of true friendship, of community life? Do you have a rose-tinted image of what's involved? I think I sometimes do. Now, the New Testament writers presume that, as you can see from many of the letters that were written to the church, that we are in community and that it will be messy. I recently had the realisation that while in my mind I have a desire for deep and meaningful friendship and community, that actually they're pretty costly, and it takes significant time and energy for me to live that out. I don't know if I've been doing that. I don't think I've sometimes been investing what is required for deep friendship. And also, I was trying to work out what was my experience with that kind of friendship. I've moved around quite a lot in life, and I don't know if I've sort of got that many really deep, long-term friendships. But that kind of friendship needs true commitment and openness. That's something to work on anyway. So also I think it's not until we live in close community with people, like Hannah kind of mentioned earlier, that we become aware of some of our own weaknesses and limitations, and that we can start the work of submitting those to God and letting Him work on them with us. For true Jesus-shaped community, we have to be ready to serve, to put others first, and to give of ourselves. Dietrich Bonhoeffer says in his book, Life Together, every human wish stream that is injected into the Christian community is a hindrance to genuine community and must be banished if genuine community is to survive. He who loves his dream of a community more than the Christian community itself, so he who loves his dream of a Christian community more than the Christian community itself becomes a destroyer of the latter. Another barrier to Christian community is fear and insecurity, and we all have fears and insecurities. When we get close to people, they see both our best but also our worst. And maybe we worry, what will people think of us when they see our real self laid bare? Or perhaps we're fearful of commitment because we've been hurt before. Or we're aware of giving up our autonomy or getting dragged into things that we're not comfortable with. But through growing in relationship with people step by step, building trust and slowly sharing our fears and failures, and by working towards finding our security in God and who we are in Him, These are things that can be overcome. M. Scott Peck wrote, "There can be no vulnerability without risk. There can be no community without vulnerability. There can be no peace and ultimately no life without community."
So how do we go about community? Whenever I talk about it, like when we've been preparing this, I always find myself inspired and encouraged, but also challenged by the barriers in my own life and the ways that I've not yet entered into and experienced community to the fullest extent. So we just thought it would be helpful to think practically, how do we go about this? Maybe you're looking for a deeper sense of community where you are, or you're moving to a new place for university or for a job, or even moving back in with your parents for a period of time. Here are some practical tips that we've thought of and things that might be helpful in that.
Great. So the first one is to start with the basics. Start where you are in the area where you live or the church that you're involved with. That normally makes sense to be the good starting place. Also, it might just be one or two people meeting together, and weekly or monthly, and that's what it looks like. So something like that. And then look for people who are seeking to grow in love towards God and others.
Yeah, that's always a good tip. In terms of what form the community might take, if you are part of a church and join one of their pre-existing small groups, then there may be a set format already. But if you are forming a new group, then maybe you want to think about what do you want to do together? Do you want to eat a meal regularly together, have a rhythm of prayer, or a specific focus for the group? But just be mindful that it has to be sustainable. If all of you are working full time, then you don't want to be doing something together every night of the week. So yeah, sustainability is really important, and be manageable as well. And also, you don't have to have everything figured out from the get-go. It's a journey, and communities and relationships evolve. People can leave, new people will join, and the dynamics of the community can change. And that's something just to be aware of, and helpful for us to know that at the start.
Yeah, it's definitely useful to know. So next is to evaluate your expectations. Relationships take time, and it takes time to get to know people and to feel safe to open up. So don't expect them just to happen automatically. Give it a bit of time. No community is going to be perfect. I mean, they're made up of imperfect people. So that's not to say you shouldn't have any expectations. That whole point, evaluate your expectations. But be mindful of bouncing around between various churches and groups in search of this dream community you're looking for. Because that probably doesn't exist. Or waiting around expecting it to come to you, because that rarely happens either, really.
Yeah, it can be really easy, I think, to think that the grass is greener on the other side and look at some communities from a distance, but we don't know what's going on in the midst of those, and all communities are going to have their difficulties. I think something else to be mindful is of trying to replicate a previous experience, whether that's of a church or of a life group or small group you've been part of. Especially if that's been really positive for you, it can be easy to just try and look for something that's the same as that, but you're never going to quite find that. So I guess just be mindful of that, and just try to be open to a new thing that God might have for you. And it might be hard, but hopefully it'll be rewarding. And also just don't assume that community has to look like you. For example, different ages and things like that. The beauty of the church, like we said earlier, is in its diversity, and we lead a life group in our church, and I really love that over time we've got a whole range of ages in our life group now, from kind of people in their 20s to people in their 60s, and actually that's it's just really rich and diverse, and we get a whole range of life experience and faith experience when we're talking about things, so it can be really helpful. And just something particularly I wanted to mention was about for students, just be mindful of the student bubble. I think when you're a student, it can be really easy to just be surrounded by students at everything you go to, even at church, joining a student-specific life group or something like that. And actually it might be that there's loads of lovely people in your church who it will be a shame for you not to get to know. I know when we were at university, I just loved being part of a small church where there was kind of people that were surrogate parents and grandparents to us when our families were quite a few hours away, and it brought just a something different to our lives that was different to my friends around me that weren't Christians that didn't have that. Just be mindful of that.
The next one is to be prepared to invest. It's going to take some initial effort to get to know people. You can't expect a magical community to surround you if you arrive late to church and you leave as soon as it finishes. You might have to stick around, go to a few events, go and chat to people, make an effort. I know that can be really difficult, but it can be really fruitful as well. And maybe get involved in serving, finding something in your church or in that community that you're wanting to join, that you can get involved with and be a part of and get to know people. That can be very beneficial. It does require commitment, both in terms of investing in relationships, but also practically prioritising time to meet in community. It has to be a purposeful thing. And if you're already part of a community, such as a small group, then think about how you can be welcoming to new people, but also how you can invest in community in that setting.
Great. And other thing we wanted to just talk about was, the question of, do you have to live near people to be in community with them? And I thought John Watt Comer said something really interesting in his talks on community, on that series that we mentioned earlier, was that we often mistake connectivity for community, and we can have Christian friends elsewhere, and we certainly have Christian friends that we don't live near that are really helpful and important in our lives. But actually there's something different, I think, about face-to-face conversation. And I can talk to a friend on the phone, but actually if I turn up to our life group and I've had a sleepless night with our baby or a hard day at work, people can pick up on that face-to-face much more, and the human interaction, I think, is much more real. Obviously, during lockdown, we have had this time where it's not been possible to meet face-to-face with people, and so we've had to get creative and use digital technology, which has been, is great that we've had that, but it's definitely made me realise how much I value the face-to-face interaction with people, and something that hopefully I'll take forward and value even more in the future.
Great. So I think there's quite a lot of few points there about how we can sort of start where we are and get involved in the communities and think about things around us. But perhaps you're looking for sort of an intentional community, somewhere that you can go and have a look, or somewhere you can go and have a look what community looks like in different contexts. There's quite a number of communities that can be visited or joined for a certain period of time, so we thought we'd give you a few examples in case that was of interest to you. One of those is 24/7 prayer communities. So Hannah did her gap year with 24/7 prayer, so that was, I guess, that kind of thing. You lived in community and got a lot of really useful experiences from that.
And there's a number of those across various countries in the world as well.
Yeah, so that's one area. Then there's things like the Lambeth Palace community of St Anselm, which is right there in the middle of London, and young people go and spend a year there. That's sort of one of their models for, and live in community and see what that's like, and have a real rhythm of prayer and stuff like that. There's St Fridays Wide in Oxford.
Yeah, I think that's very similar to the community of St Anselm, in that it's for younger people to spend a year there.
Yeah. And then there's Urban Abbey in Nottingham. That's another example. And Tree of Life in Leicester. And there are loads of other ones as well, and different ways of experiencing that. And sometimes it can be, if we don't have an example for something, it can be quite hard to work out what to do. Or we can go to those kind of places and get some ideas, or God can speak to us through what we see there. Great, so we hope that the seminar's been helpful to you, and it's got you thinking and left you with a few key things that you want to investigate or put into action. So as we go, we just pray that God would break down any of those barriers we're facing which hinder us from knowing the fullness of His community in our lives today. Amen.
Amen.